Okay, we're recording. Today we have one of my favorite people in the whole world, Tony Swatton, who owns Sword and Stone in Burbank, California. You have seen his work, I guarantee you, so many times. Every single movie and TV show that you can think of that has, other than Game of Thrones, that has armor in it, Tony has touched that film with his products, with everything that he creates in his shop in Burbank. He is an incredible talent. Over 1 billion people have seen Tony and his blacksmith work. And here he is, my friend Tony Swatton.
Well, thank you, Denise. So you're in my what I call my conference room with some of there's a bunch of crowns and things from various movies back in here, and swords off to the side. Let me see if I can spin it around. There's some of the female armor and stuff that I've done for.
Nice. Beautiful.
So
I like your conference room. I haven't been to his new shop, just so everybody knows. I was at his shop that was a block away. So I haven't been to this location yet. I'm dying to see it in person.
Well, hopefully when we can travel, but you and Dave are totally welcome to come out and take a tour. My old shop, when I initially started, with gem cutting at the age of 7, and by 13 I was doing that professionally. At 15, I sold a very expensive opal for over $1,000. So I got a business license and a resale number, and so I've been doing this since I was 15 years old. And who taught
you to do the gem cutting?
I read books. The internet was not available in the 70s. So right. My father had sent me a rock tumbler when I lived in Vancouver, Canada. I was born in Hammersmith, England, in London. So it's kind of a predestined, fated thing with the name, Hammersmith being what I do. But initially it was all about trying to reveal what was inside of rocks. I wanted to see the inherent beauty in a rock to create a jewel out of it. And then I needed to set the jewelry, to mount the stone. Met Jody Sampson, who created the Conan sword. So I made some knives using old files with improper heat treating techniques. And then started making armor with a group called the Society of Creative Anachronism, the SCA. That was all before I was 18. And I think it was about 23, 24. No, it was actually earlier than that. I got approached by a prop house to make a bunch of sculptures for Disney World for the, can't even remember the name of the ride. The ride's no longer there, but it was at Epcot Center. It was 7 sculptures that I created in a couple months. And that got me the work when I moved out of my mom's garage to a small shop in North Hollywood, where I did work for, I made the hook, which is...
Oh, you've got the hook. Awesome.
Hook is right here. So I don't know if that's visible. Let's see.
Yeah, there you go. Now you got, yeah. Beautiful.
So there's the hook, ransom note dagger. This is Blackbeard's dagger from...
Wait, I can't see it. Your finger's covering you up. Yep.
Okay. From Pirates of the Caribbean.
Wait, I think we're getting... I've just got your logo. I'm not seeing you.
Okay, I don't know what happened here. So...
There we go. Now we're back.
And a few other things. This is Rufio's leather patch from his belt from Dante Bosco. So after working out of a garage, I moved into a shop in North Hollywood, and I was there for 2 years. During that time, I created the hook, did work for Michael Jackson, did another Disney theme park in Euro Disney, and then moved to a shop where you initially met me, where I was at for a quarter of a century. I was there from 1991 until 2015 or 2016. And 2016, I got a 30 days notice when they sold the property to move 150 tons of machinery and 25 years accumulation of stuff. So we moved it out, put it in storage for a month, and then the current building I'm at right now is 1 block away from where I was for 25 years. And it's much bigger, much nicer kind of setup. right now I'm kind of trapped in this room because all my mannequins and armor and display cases are behind the conference room door. So I don't even know if I can get out of here or I can walk you through some of the workshop, and there's some pretty cool machinery in there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully we can do this
Yeah.
again when
Yeah.
you're not in production.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have 2 Super Bowl commercials, a forged piece of iron for a new feature film coming out, and a popular TV show where I'm making 5 swords and finishing up a 6-foot-long sword for the filming that'll be happening in 2 weeks on camera. And I've got some collectors coming in. I do copies of some of the swords. I made the swords for Pirates of the Caribbean, so I have a Napoleonic sword that I turned into a Barbossa's sword, and I got some of those hilts, so I'm putting together some of those for collectors. So
Nice.
So those are going out, and just I'll be here until 3 o'clock in the morning.
You need to get more rest. You definitely do.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite stories of yours, which I'm dying for other people to hear because it's so crazy. Tell the story of when you did the bike tour up to Canada with your son.
Well, so in 1991, I was working on the Disney carousel shop in Euro Disney. Then I got approached to make the hook and swords for the movie Hook for Spielberg, which was huge for an unknown basically metal worker and jeweler. And then I started making armor for Michael Jackson. So I was really busy with all of that, and I was approached by Eiko Ishioka's people from Bram Stoker's Dracula. But during that time, I'd also gotten full custody of my son when he was 3.5 years old. His mom dropped him off with my mother and said, take him or put him up for adoption. And it was like I had no choice but to take him. Mm-hmm. So I was also working, I don't know, like 72 hours with cat naps, sleeping at the shop over the 3-day period, coming home, sleeping for 12 hours and doing another 72-hour, thing. So about a 140-hour work week while having, full custody of a, 3.5-year-old. So when he turned 4, my brother and my friends, we flew up to Seattle with our mountain bikes, and I took a trailer with a Burley Light trailer, and we bicycled back down the coast. So that was about 1,800 miles from the Canadian border back to Los Angeles. My brother and his friends, they took off from Portland. So we did about 500-600 miles from Seattle up to Port Angeles, Canadian border, missed the ferry going over to Victoria, British Columbia. So we went south. And so the first 2 weeks, my brother and my friends were with me on the bike trip. And we were camping out. I don't even think we may have stayed at a hotel one time. Just doing, up to 100 miles a day on a mountain bike, towing a 4-year-old in a trailer. So they left from Portland. I continued down the coast, and we had a great time, really kind of a good bonding thing for my son. And we just come through the western portion of between San Francisco and Los Angeles, actually between Monterey and San Luis Obispo, is this narrow winding road along the coast called Pacific Coast Highway, going through Big Sur, which is just crazy winding roads and, no shoulder, a lot of traffic. And we had camped out at a place called Plaskett Creek near Jade Cove, collected a bunch of jade and driftwood, hauled it back on the trailer. And that was about 85 miles north of Morro Bay. So we pulled into Morro Bay. So I went into just a convenience store to stock up on supplies. And we were going to camp down, 10 miles south at another place, the Morro Bay campground. And the people at the convenience store asked me, well, where are you coming from? Are you on a bicycle? I mean, you seem to be heading south. And I'm like, well, we stayed at Plaskett Creek. And they're like, that's 100 miles away. That's no way. And I'm like, no, it's only 85. I just looked at my odometer on my bike computer. And they said, well, with you did this with a child in the back of the trailer? And I'm like, yeah. So David and I had helmets with two-way speaker radios hooked into, so a little microphone, so I could talk to him back in the trailer and see everything. And so we had all that going on. And they said, well, where did you start? And I said, well, we flew into Seattle and then we bicycled down. And they're like, well, that's over 2,000 miles away. And I'm like, no, I think we're at about 1,500 miles right now. And they're like, well, where are you going? I said, well, I live in Burbank, so we're going back to Burbank. So he's like, that's like 2,500 miles altogether. And I'm like, no, it's like 1,800 total. We're 300 miles from home. We've already done 1,500. And he's like, well, how long have you been gone? And I'm like, I'm on vacation. I'm spending time with my son. I have no idea what the date is. So I'm like, well, what day is it? And so he tells me the date, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, we've been gone for a little over a month, And he goes, how do you get time off work? And I said, well, I have my own business. And it's kind of difficult to explain what I do. Mm-hmm. And especially at that point, I hadn't done the 300 plus movies that I've done now. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, I make things. And he goes, what do you mean you make things? And I looked down on his countertop. He had a copy of People magazine with Elizabeth Taylor's wedding shown on there, with Michael Jackson wearing a pair of metal boots that I'd made on the cover of the magazine. So I said, well, add the magazine to my list. These are the boots that I made for Michael Jackson. And he's like, each question is a bigger and bigger lie in his mind. He's getting pissed off. So they're literally getting ready to throw me out of the store. As I walk out of the store and I open up the doors and I look to the side that we'd passed coming in, was the billboard for the hook. If you remember, it was just the top of the hook is a massive billboard. Yeah. And I come back and I'm like, oh yeah, and I made that too. And he's literally just red in the face, furious that he was ready to call child services because I was that of a liar, and that was pretty crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And these are the insane things.
Yeah.
It would be impossible to do, but your life could be a sitcom. It's just incredible.
Some of the stuff I do, some of the people I deal with, it's a little funny.
Tell the story about the showroom.
Well, my old showroom, I'm no longer open to the public. It's strictly by appointment for studios only, as you can see with the amount of work I have. And I was as busy back then. I had three of my clients show up, and one of them was a Catholic priest who was making a chalice for his church. Another one was a porn producer who was picking up some of the sexy armor I make for a porn video production. Chatsworth, the San Fernando Valley was the capital of adult entertainment. So he was in there. And another client collected knives, and he was an FBI agent. So they're all three of them in the showroom. They're just wandering around. My phone rings, so I go into my office, answer the phone, and they're talking amongst themselves, and they come back out. And I'm just giggling to myself, and I'm like, I just have to point out that, I want to introduce them, and, what each vocation, what their profession is. This is, you're a Catholic priest, you're an FBI agent, and you're a porn star and a producer. So pretty funny.
Only you can have that happen.
Well, that's, kind of a daily or weekly occurrence, with some of the stuff that comes through. So funny. When I was working on Batman Forever, I was doing a lot of the handcuffs and bat gadgetry for props, and then I was doing jewelry for the Riddler and other elements for costumes. And then I rented 5 suits of armor for Bruce Wayne's manor. There's a bit where they kind of fall down like dominoes down the stairs, and so I have to sign a non-disclosure agreement with these people, and they. So I'm not telling each department that I'm working for them. And so they all showed up at the same time, and they're like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, well, Tony's making armor for me. Tony's cutting jewelry, making jewelry. He's making the handcuffs, And so that they don't want to overload me knowing that I'm a one-man operation. But, at the same point, I'm working with all the different productions.
Right. Yeah.
Something similar happened on Pirates of the Caribbean, where the prop master on the first Pirates came in, and I was making like 600 weapons for Last Samurai, as well as about 150 to 200 weapons for Master and Commander before Pirates of the Caribbean started up. And Pirates of the Caribbean, we had no idea how big it would be. They came in, they said, well, we'd like you to replicate this historic sword for Jack Sparrow. And in fact, this is from Pirates 2. This is the Jack Sparrow sword we replicated. This is Johnny Depp's screen-used sword from that movie. And so they placed an order for maybe 50 principal pieces for Orlando Bloom, from Norrington's sword that they give away, and all the high-end hero pieces. But then they placed an order with 4 other vendors in town for like 50, 60 pieces each. So I had a big long table set up with the 50 pieces for them, with Jack Sparrow and Will Turner and Barbossa and all their pieces laid out for their hero pieces, with a section of cardboard segmenting it from another 50 pieces for another prop house, another 50 pieces for another prop house, another 75 piece for another prop house, and another 50 to 75 for another prop house. So they'd given all the work to other people because they didn't want to overload me, knowing I was a one-man operation, but they didn't realize that I do the work for everyone else too. So after that, it worked out pretty good. So
how much help did you have to create all of that?
I brought in a bunch of professional knife makers from the American Bladesmith Society. I had 3 or 4 people from there, and other prop people to help out, basically to cut out the blades and prep some of the pieces for me, and simplify stuff. I had a really proficient blacksmith working with me who was able to forge out some of Johnny Depp's rough forging for the pieces. But basically it was just working crazy hours. I was doing 35 swords per day, just grinding them. So
wow,
it was pretty intense.
And the Capital One ads that you produced all of the pieces for, share with our listeners and our viewers how those got repurposed.
I'm trying to think of
with the NORSE Hollywood.
Yeah, Dining Vikings. So in I want to say that was early 2000s that Capital One credit card started a campaign with "What's in Your Wallet," with kind of stylized Vikings that they referred to as Visigoths. And so I've made all kinds of stuff. I have a miniature guillotine in the other room, if I could, see if get the guys to bring it in, that we were cutting bagels for Bjorn's bed and breakfast. But we did high-heeled shoes with spikes on it for, a runway thing. We did all kinds of crazy stuff. But then because I have all these costumes that I'd made for Beowulf and for Capital One and for the Thor movies, sitting around, I can't remember, I think we were working on Amistad, and it was it was pretty bad because I didn't realize the context of where it came from, but I had 2 or 3 guys working for me, and we had to deliver all these machetes for the for the scene, and they wanted to go home, and I'm like, no, I'm locking the doors. We're going to finish up everything, and you'll get paid more, but we need to deliver it. And one of the guys, a Ukrainian guy working for me, started a chant with the rest of the guys in the group saying "work equals freedom," which I didn't realize was the translation of the German "Arbeit macht frei" from the gates of Auschwitz. So I thought, well, this is a great, work chant. So I spray painted it on my wall, and then found out afterwards that it wasn't completely correct, But so we were working on that, and we finished up some other stuff. And I said, well, hey, look, we're done. let's go and get something to eat. And, where do you want to go eat? And someone said, well, let's go up to, Brazilian barbecue. We can go to sushi. We can do this. And I said, someone suggested IKEA for Swedish meatballs. And I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. So I'm like, well, here, bring your wives and girlfriends over, and we'll all dress up as Vikings and go to IKEA for Swedish meatballs. And that became a monthly occurrence. And we started a flash mob called the NORSE Hollywood Dining Vikings. At one point, we were at an exhibit on the Northern Lights at Griffith Park Observatory, where Adele just did her concert. So we'd shown up there, probably 9 or 10 of us, early in our Viking rating. At this point, we're all carrying axes and spears and, swords and everything, big spiked flails and so forth. And we walk into an auditorium to see this exhibit on the Northern Lights, which is the Valkyries taking their chariots across the skies, which was the Viking mythology on it. And we're all dressed to the T's on that. We walk out and security is cordoned off the door to, relinquish us of our weapons. And we're like, no problem. Here's the sword, here's the axe, where's your weapons check, your coat check. So we did that. And that's where the name was coined. Someone asked us where we were from, and we said from Burbank, and they were from out of state. And they said, well, where's Burbank? And I said, well, it's near North Hollywood. And they heard Norse Hollywood. And I'm like, yeah, okay, Norse Hollywood.
That's perfect. That works.
So we've been invited to Norway. At one point, one of our raids, we went to Griffith Park and rode the miniature trains around Carrolltown train station at LA Live Steamers. So we'd have 20 Vikings dressed up riding trains about the size of a milk crate. And we had a photographer came in and documented us doing that. And one of the girls who has great tracts of land, she's, very bodacious, and took a photograph of her up on a locomotive as an up angle. So, I mean, each of her boobs are as big as your head. And, I normally call the brass bras that I make Golden Globes.
Right.
But these ones I made out of steel, so I called it her iron lungs. And that photograph that he posted got picked up by a newspaper in Oslo, Norway, and was on the front page. And we've been invited to Viking things in Iceland and Norway, Minnesota. Pretty crazy. So we also used to play on Super Bowl Sunday. We'd play dodgeball, or not dodgeball. We'd play that's upcoming, depending on COVID situations. But in the past, there was a group of Jack Sparrow impersonators who would buy copies of this sword. I can't sell Jack Sparrow's sword, so I would sell Spack Jarrow. To evade Disney's copyright. I also sold Till Werner's instead of Will Turner's sword. But they're identical to what I made for the movie, basically. So these guys would dress up as Jack Sparrow, and they started a flag football team. So they challenged NORSE Hollywood Dining Vikings to play flag football against their team, and we do this on Super Bowl Sundays. And then one of the Order of the Sparrow Warriors football team house for a big after party. So we ended up having like 200-300 people documented from various news channels, a lot of
and you turned that into a fundraiser, didn't you?
We were going to. We've never really,
not formally, but
not formally. I mean, we've done stuff for the Mayor's Fund from New York when there was a hurricane had gone through New York and damaged some buildings. We donated some money and stuff for that. In fact, we've been hired from DreamWorks to do a meet and greet for the premiere of How to Train Your Dragon 3 at their campus in Glendale. And so after the people from DreamWorks call up and said, hey, we heard about your flash mob of Vikings. We'd like to hire you and some other people and bring some costumes and meet and greet with the animators and production team who did the movie. And so I'm like, how'd you even hear about me? I mean, I'm not a real business. I'm a real business for what I make, but not for the flash mob. I do that for fun. That's just to blow off steam. And a few months previous, the co-producer of How to Train Your Dragon had gone on a Viking raid with us, where we had ridden the miniature trains in Travel Town, as well as gone to Viking Pizza, which was an Armenian pizza maker who had learned his trade in Norway. So he called.
My God, how random is that?
Yeah. And then from there, we went to a midnight showing of Conan the Barbarian out at the New Art Theater in West Hollywood. So at the New Art Theater, we had one of the producers and his wife dressed up as Vikings. I have a friend of mine who's a cosplayer who's DC's preferred Wonder Woman prior to Gal Gadot coming in. And so she was wearing like a, let's see. So she did Wonder Woman. So we did Wonder Woman.
But that's beautiful. Oh, that's gorgeous.
So I took a Wonder Woman tiara I'd made, and I'd made the bustier for her. So she was wearing this as a Valkyrie Wonder Woman. Mm-hmm. And another friend of mine, Eugene, was an actor on Game of Thrones. And so he was dressed up as a Viking. And so instantly recognizable as the Lannister character he was, even though he was in Viking garb. And so it was the co-producer had shown up there and referred us as a source to do, the meet and greet for DreamWorks. So it's just kind of funny,
And didn't you, what I remember was when you rented the duck, remember you had so how did that come about?
Well, I had an assistant working for me who lived in Long Beach, and she says, we should do a Viking raid down in Long Beach and hire the Duck, which is a World War II military landing vehicle that they'd been converted into a tour kind of thing. And it would take you a tour of Long Beach proper and then go into the harbor, and you would sail by the Queen Mary and everything. So we decided to do that. We hired the Duck for the day to meet us down at the train station off of the Blue Line, which is the light rail that comes from downtown Los Angeles from Union Station to Long Beach is the terminus of their line. But we left from the end of the Red Line, which is the subway in Los Angeles in North Hollywood. So we had 35 Vikings in full garb, no weapons at this point. We had a van full of weapons driven down separately because we're riding public transportation.
Right.
Took the Red Line from North Hollywood through about a dozen stops to Union Station, transferred to the Blue Line. Now the Blue Line, this light rail, goes through Compton, Watts, and some pretty sketchy neighborhoods. So you've got two train cars filled with crazy, predominantly white Vikings, and the regulars getting on the train, walk on the train, the doors open, walk onto the train, they go, hell no, turn around and catch the next train. So we got down to Long Beach and we didn't check the scheduling, what was happening. So Red Bull was having their flying contest called the Fluke Dog. And so there were over 100,000 people crowding the streets of Long Beach when we arrived. So our Duck pulled up at the train station, picked us up. And then we met at a gay bar called Hamburger Mary's, where they do karaoke on Sundays and bingo. So we're out there, great food, really fun people too. And they loved a bunch of Vikings showing up. And then 5 other people who had come down separately, not riding the train, showed up. So we had over, I think there were 42 or 45 people all together. And we brought shields out and we decorated the side of the Duck. I brought about a 3-foot diameter foam skull from Costco that I'd bought around Halloween, and then mounted horns on it. We strapped that to the front of the Duck, and then we took out a van load of weapons. So we had the spears, the axes, the swords, everything. So we're riding, after having lunch at the Hamburger Mary's, we're riding through the Fluke Dog thing, brandishing weapons at the cops that are doing crowd control. The streets are absolutely packed. Then rode through by the Queen Mary and everything, and it was pretty epic.
I never wanted more to live in Burbank than when you guys were doing all of that. I would have so done that. I'm so jealous.
Maybe we'll bring it to Chicago sometime,
Oh, that would be super fun. Yeah. Michigan Avenue needs some Vikings.
Well, part of the problem with flying with all this stuff, and another
how do you get through not customs, but how do you get through security?
Oh, we mess with them. So Southwest Airlines was having like a $79 round trip for the weekend, wherever you want to go, wherever they flew. So one of our guys who's an actor at Universal Studios, he plays Doc Brown and one of the Transformers, and he's also Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. Mm-hmm. He's like, why don't we go up to San Francisco? We can fly to Oakland, and then you met me at Comic-Con. Comic-Con also does WonderCon, which was taking place up in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. So we flew up like on a Thursday or on a Friday, which happened to be April 1st. The Burbank Airport, which is a small regional airport, not on a busy day, and we allotted 3 hours to get through TSA. And one of our members is, I don't know, he's like 85 now, but he was probably in his late 70s at that point, makes wooden models of ships and things. So I had him make a red hull and red sailed Chinese pirate ship, and I carried it in a leather satchel. So I went through with my horned helmet coming around and spikes on the top and a shield with a spike, all of which I had to go back from security and put it into checked baggage to ship up there. And we had 9 of us flying. So we get through TSA, and he says, "You're free to go." And I reach into my leather satchel, and I said, "Well, you've never looked in here." And he says, "No, you're good. We've seen you like 6 times. You're fine to go." And I pull out my Chinese pirate ship. And he goes, "Yeah, that's fine." And I said, "Well, don't you want to inspect it?" And he goes to reach for it. And this is the whole punchline, being April 1st, messing with TSA. I go, "Don't touch my junk." Pirate ship. And he says, "What did you say?" And I said, haha, April Fools. And he's like, "Oh, I'm going to call my supervisor over." So he calls his supervisor, and the supervisor says, "Tell him what you told me." And I'm like, "Don't touch my junk." And they're busting up. This is hilarious. So we walk through. We get on the plane, and the flight attendants from Southwest, as we, because it's, you're not going up the gangplank thing. We're going over just stairs. As we get into the plane, they're handing us alcoholic drink vouchers. We're like, "What? Is this a special?" She goes, "Vikings on a plane. You guys get to drink for free." So same thing happened. We get to Oakland. We come out. I'd rented out a bunch of other weapons and costumes and armor to a photographer up in the Bay Area. They came by with a van, dropped off the weapons. And at this point, we're riding through BART, the Bay Area Rapid Transit, going through Oakland. Same situation like Watts and Compton. The regulars get on the train. They look at us and they go, "Hell no," and walk on and take the next train. So we wandered through WonderCon. We went to Fisherman's Market, Fisherman's Wharf, everything. We tried taking the ferry over to Alcatraz. We missed that. We went to Bubba Gump's and had a big fish meal there. Found another member, David, who was working as a server there. He was off at that point. He was getting ready to leave. And we walked in, and they said, "Oh, you got to have this 6'4" red-haired bearded Viking guy come out to be your server." So he hung out and helped us with the stuff there. And the following day, we took off the Viking garb, and we were in street clothes, and we went up to Muir Woods, which is a beautiful redwood state park just north of the Golden Gate Bridge. We're in a van, and we pull over there, and our guy from Universal steps out of the van. Everyone empties out, and he goes back in, and he transforms himself back into Han Solo. So he's put on the vest, the boots, the everything, and facial hair and wig to, because that's what he's a character actor making different things. We're like, "Oh my God!" So we're all bowing down to him. All hail the Dork Lord. So we walk up into the woods and the redwoods, and my son and I are up ahead of it, and This guy's dressed as Han Solo, being, directed, for modeling poses in the woods. And Connor and I run into this family up there, and I said, "You realize this is where they filmed the Moons of Endor for Star Wars,
Mm-hmm.
And if you go around the corner, there's a professional actor portraying Han Solo, and he's modeling in the woods here." And they're like, "Oh wow!" And they go get ready to run off. And I said, "Yeah, but if you ask nicely for a Scooby snack, which is what they're asking for him at Universal Studios,
Mm-hmm.
he'll respond in kind." So they come running around, we chasing after him. The kids go, Han Solo. I mean, can we have a Scooby snack? And he responds as Shaggy from Scooby Doo. And, it's like, it's ingrained into his, So, yeah, I mean, that was just one weekend, it's kind of stuff we do. So
That's so perfect.
yeah.
Now, part of your job obviously is the many dangers that you encounter, because it's a it's just part of your job, your career. So share with people one of my favorite stories about when you cut your nose off.
I was working on some armor. Again, it's in the other room where I bring it out. I was polishing up what's called a knee cup, or a pull line, on a Gothic armor, and I was wearing safety glasses and a brimmed baseball cap and gloves and everything. And the buffer, high-speed buffer, pulled it out of my hands, bounced it off the wall, and came in and bumped my face. And I couldn't tell how badly I was hurt, didn't hurt my eyes, or anything. So I grabbed a towel and covered up my face. I had people outside having a barbecue, and I walk out and I took the towel off, and they're ready to throw up. I mean, they can see inside my head. My left nostril was partially severed. It was hanging out like over my lip, over my chin. Required 44 stitches to sew it back up. So one of the guys at the barbecue drove me over to emergency room. Now, at this point, I'm self-employed. I didn't have insurance. And I'm filling out my own admittance form. And so we're there for close to 2.5, 3 hours. The towel is absolutely, blood's pooling around on the floor. And my friend goes up to the triage nurses and goes, "Hey, what's up with, she brings out the chart, looks at it, says, "Well, tell him to keep his head tilted back and the blood flow should stop," And he grabs the chart from her, and he sees that because I'm in shock and I'm downplaying the injury, that I hadn't said that I've severed my nose, cut my nose off in the injury, an industrial injury. What I wrote is the reason for the visit was I had a nosebleed. My nose was bleeding because I cut it off.
Mm-hmm.
So they bring me in, and they said, "Well, you're in luck. We have one of the renowned plastic surgeons from practices in Beverly Hills and everything. He's here right now, and he'd be able to look at you." And I said, "Great." So I talked to him, and he says, "Well, I need $1,200 cash from you before I can even look for, I don't know what it's going to cost, but $1,200 is your initial payment." I said, "Well, I have $200-300 in my wallet. I could, get a couple other people. I think I got $800 or $900 within a half an hour." And he's like, "Well, my shift's over. I'm leaving. You don't have $1,200. You'll have the regular emergency doctors sew my nose back on." So it was the inner membrane, then the cartilage, which was kind of a trip. I mean, if you've ever had your ears pierced high up in your ear,
I have.
it kind of sounds. So each time they poked a hole to stitch it through, reverberating through my head. So it was 43, 44 stitches, internal cartilage, and then the external, everything put together. And, it happened the end of March. So April 1st, I have my nose all sewn up, and I have hay fever. So I'm sneezing and want to blow my nose off. But probably mid-May or June, my old shop had a intercom doorbell. And again, I'm only open by appointment certain times during the week, and certain days I was open to the public. So someone shows up on a non-public day, rings my doorbell. I come up front, and there's this guy with a crumpled front panel on his Rolls Royce. Since I make armor, my dad was a Rolls Royce mechanic and bodywork guy who had worked with a bunch of shops in Beverly Hills and Altadena and throughout Los Angeles, Southern California. So they knew that my sheet metal work that I applied to armor, I'm not into cars. I was able to repair it, but they'd referred this guy to me to saying, we can't do your car work. You need something a little bit more intense. Try the Sword and the Stone. It's not really a car guy, but he can fix your car. So this was 3 referrals from Beverly Hills and, all throughout Southern California. So this guy shows up to my door and I'm talking to him. I still have stitches in my nose. And I look at him and, I recognize him. And I'm like, aren't you the renowned plastic surgeon from Beverly Hills who practices at St. Joseph's Medical Center? And he goes, yes, I am. I'm like, well, I can fix your car, but I'm going to need $20,000 right now. And he's like, that's ridiculous. That's highway robbery. I'm not going to pay that much for it. And I said, do you see the stitches in my nose? You wanted $1,200 to, to even look at me. I'll never fix your car. So it was like a 6-week to 8-week instant karma, but it was kind of fun to, have
That's
that.
so rare that happens.
Yeah. So
that was so perfect.
Yeah. It's kind of fun. So.
And tell them about the degloving.
The degloving, working on another commercial that required 6 weeks, and I had 5 days in which to make the piece, and it was being done on camera. So I was polishing the piece. I was wearing a glove, which I don't normally do on the grinder. The grinder I was using was not OSHA approved. It was something I built from a restaurant table base for the stand, a motor from a car wash down the street, and cobbled together some bearings and pieces from a cart and a roller skate wheel. So this is what I initially made when I was 17 years old, when I met Jody Sampson, to make knives. Mm-hmm. And I was still using this. I still use it to this day. And I don't wear gloves because the gloves will catch on the belt or the drive belt. It's a belt sander. So I'm wearing gloves because I'm working faster and I need to, and the material's getting hot. And I go to wipe off some of the abrasive belts, and it caught in the drive belt and pulled my left hand into the grinder and right in, let's see if we can get it here, where we are. So this finger right in here has a short nail, and from this portion around was pulled off, and that's an injury called degloving. You can see what the normal finger looks like above it. So a bigger nail. So about 3 weeks later, I'm cleaning up the shop, and I found the glove that I was wearing filled with blood and all torn up. And I shook it out, and I found the basically the nail and the finger. It just basically pulled off all the flesh around the nail, leaving just a skeletal fingertip, which, as you can see, like a lobster, I regenerated. I call this my Deadpool finger because it's like when regenerates there. So,
and tell them how you got it fixed.
Well, again, I went to my usual hospital. They should know me by name, and they look at it and they said, okay, there's nothing we can do here other than apply sterile bandages. You need to call an orthopedic doctor or a plastic surgeon. And here's a list of people that at this point I did have insurance, and I called probably 30 of the providers, the doctors who could do the work, none of which would be able to fit me in for a week. I needed it to be dealt within 12 hours preferably, and 8 hours had already gone by. So one of my employees was born in Mexico, down in Mexicali, right at the California border. And he's called his uncle, and his uncle was a doctor down there who called a friend of his who was an orthopedic doctor. So this probably, I would say, happened on a Wednesday. And so Wednesday night, when I pulled my fingertip up, I cleaned it up, bandaged it up, and then I had 4 guys doing additional work. So I went through and finished welding everything and prepping it so they could work while I was at the emergency room, knowing that would take a while. Thursday morning, nothing was happening. So Thursday afternoon, We drove down to Mexico. We went to the orthopedic doctor by about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The bandaging and stuff that I had done had already, kind of healed up enough stuff, and the skin had started pushing back. So it just naturally was healing. And he's like, there's nothing really you can do. We can take a skin graft off of your, butt cheek or something and sew it on your fingertip. But I would suggest just, keep it clean and elevated and don't work. So we came back on Thursday night after going down to Mexico. I'm not a fan of American medical, stuff. I mean, the situation with the nose with like $1,200 to start. The quote to get a fingertip was $15,000-$20,000, even with insurance, because it was kind of an out-of-pocket kind of thing. When I went down to Mexico, it was $90,
Yeah.
So it was, pretty wild. So
that's a good connection you made. You
yeah,
better keep using those doctors.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, or, not chopping off pieces of my fingers.
Well, that would be good too. Yeah.
So.
Are you going to put it in a paperweight, or what are you going to do with it?
When I found the fingertip, shook it out of the glove. I have a friend of mine who's a belly dancer. She's a muse who's inspired a lot of the costumes that I make here. And I've given her stuffed armadillos and goats and weird stuff as odd taxidermy, which is, you wouldn't think an attractive professional dancer would appreciate, but she has a quirky sense of humor. That's why we're friends. And so I told her what had happened, and I said, yeah, I degloved my finger. And she goes, what's that? I said, I cut my fingertip off. And she goes, and I said, I just found it. She's like, oh my God, what are you going to do with it? Well, I was going to feed it to the Rottweiler dogs that are my neighbor's dogs, because the neighbors claim that they're man-eaters, and I wanted to get verifiable proof when they ate my fingertip that they were legitimate man-eaters. I would document it, show the finger with the blood and everything, and then the bloody fingertip being chucked over the fence, and watch them swallow it and go like, see?
Yeah.
And she goes, well, can I have it? And I was going to make a reliquary, basically like, which is a little pretentious on my part to make my own reliquary. But, when you'd have a, some religious icon, they would take a piece of their bone or some of their hair or whatever, and they worship that. So I'm going to make something of that nature. Been too busy, haven't gotten around to doing that, and that happened in 2018. So I doubt that'll happen, but so
here we go.
Yeah, so it's a little, so I don't know if you can see here. Whoops. So
there it is.
That's the fingernail, and there's dried skin. And this was kept in a little coin pouch in my wallet. Almost lost it.
Careful.
So
for those listening and not watching, Tony just showed us
my mummified fingertip.
His mummified fingertip.
Yeah. But,
you never know what you're going to see on my show. That's for sure. Yeah.
I've got a couple other fun things here. So I'll show you this. So picture this in black and white. This is Denzel Washington's screen-used crown from the tragedy of Macbeth.
Wow.
So you can see here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
So, yeah, I mean, some of the stuff I make, I'll make it and sell to the productions. Other things I'll make and rent it to the productions. There's another fun one somewhere here. Okay, so this is a popcorn dispenser from the Infinity Gauntlet that Thanos wore in Marvel's Infinity War.
Mm-hmm.
So we made two of the gauntlets that were oversized. They were 26 inches tall, and then I made one that was full scale like this that Josh Brolin used. In order for me to make it, I had these resin stones right in here.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the center stone. Here's the ring finger.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like, they look like pieces of coal. And now Edgar, who works for me, who took me down to Mexico, went to Mexico to see a premiere of the movie. And while he was down there, he got this popcorn dispenser at the movie theater. So I have the actual Infinity Stone models inside of a Mexican popcorn dispenser.
Popcorn dispenser.
But yeah, it's kind of wild. And there's a lot of other shows. This we filmed and started in 2016 and finished up in spring of 2017. We probably had 5 weeks to make 3 of these pieces. I have another one, full scale, 26-inch tall one that I have the parts that I could put together, but I just don't have the 2 weeks dedicated time to assemble them. But those were sold outright to to Marvel. So
now you said that you're having issues with the supply chain also, that it's impacting you. Can you tell a little bit about that?
Well, part of it is like I use a specific type of tool steel for my real hero swords. This sword right in here is aircraft aluminum and just basic steel for the guard. The ebony, I have a little bit of problems, not through supply chains, but through just endangered species. So Gaboon ebony and some of the rosewoods I deal with are I'm no longer able to purchase. Mm-hmm. But the steel blades that I would make it out of, the steel that I use comes out of a mill in the Midwest. Mm-hmm. And I tried placing an order for a ton of steel, which I normally buy at least a ton at a time. And in March of 2021. Mm-hmm. And now it's January 2022, and they still can't tell me when it's available. So I'm going through, other stock that I have to try and make it work, or using substitute materials. But yeah, it's...
Now, like with rosewood, for example, could you go to an antique show and look for antiques that are made of rosewood and then somehow repurpose that wood for your purpose?
I could, but if I was to buy a piece of wood, it'd be, $10 to $25, and I'd have to buy a $300 piece of rosewood. Mm-hmm. So right here is a Balinese carving of a monkey god. Mm-hmm. And there's a section of the body here that if I chop the head off and chop the legs off and repurpose everything here, mm-hmm. I could get one grip out of it mm-hmm. to make, if you can see here, mm-hmm. you can kind of get an idea of scale. Yep. What I can, I can only get one of these out of here, mm-hmm. but this would cost me $600. Mm. So that's not a viable source for things.
Yeah.
But I do have a stockpile of stuff that I've acquired over 35 years. It's just I want to make certain I continue having stuff to get everything going. So I make do. Now,
you were the star of Man at Arms, the YouTube series, and then you also did one after that, correct?
Yeah, I did. So Man at Arms approached me in 2012. Mm-hmm. And so I did 6 seasons of 6 weapons. But what people didn't realize, and there were probably 200-300 million people watched those 36 episodes. After I finished the 6 seasons, I did an interim thing for 3 additional episodes just to carry through until the new guys took over to do Man at Arms Reforged. And at that point, I'd also started on Azeroth Armory based on the weapons from World of Warcraft. So I do things for Blizzard and Riot and Bethesda and all these other video games. So where Jack Sparrow's sword is based off of a historical design that I'm replicating to make multiples of for a film production. The video games come with these swords that have they've never been made in real life. They're just crazy, ridiculous kind of size. And then a Man-at-Arms, I would make them with proper steel and stuff so that they would be able to, cut through things and be performance related. So it just kind of varies on stuff that way.
People don't realize what a walking encyclopedia you are of weapon history. And one of the things that surprised me, I think, was the astounding library that you have of reference. People don't realize what a treasure you are just in terms of your knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think anything about it. I have a terrible memory in that I don't really forget anything, except when I'm extremely tired. And then when I'm trying to recall things, my brain is shorting out. So I'll turn this around. You can see here, this is just one bookshelf, predominantly on reference books pertaining to, there's things from Game of Thrones, various art books, Spectrum, various artists from Comic-Con, Olivia's artwork up there, all kinds of things like that, artists I know and so forth. But this is only one of about 20 7-foot tall by 4-foot wide bookshelves. So I have over 4 or 5,000 books in my shop, and some of the books are extremely rare, back to the early 1800s, leather-bound books on collections of, weird things that have been dispersed since, like Napoleonic Wars and Civil War and, World War I and World War II. So I have collections of these things either in photographs or engravings that predate the dispersal of these collections, so. And so I could look at the primary resource, from say 1822, see something from 1915, then see something of a current museum exhibit that kind of talks about stuff, and then working with the curators and so forth. When I make copies of these pieces, I'll make them as close as possible to the original pieces, and researching it my whole life and seeing the pieces and handling the pieces. All right, this is a fiberglass copy molded off of an original of Henry VIII's armor from his foot combat armor from 1520, from the field of cloth of gold. Can't get the spring pin off the side, but anyways, the visor would open up here.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is made out of fiberglass. And I went to Tower of London in late 90s, early 2000s. And there was a company that had access to these pieces and replicated them. So this is actual size. The shape and everything is accurate. So I can make something that matches up to this based on this piece. Plus I have, the 1868 inventories from Goodrich Castle, where this helmet was originally stored, the 1915 catalogs from the Tower of London, and the 1962 collection from the Tower of London, showing different photographs of the piece, plus having a physical reference for it. So it's kind of fun,
Where are there other like museums that you go to for reference?
I've been to a few in the back east. I mean, you've got I don't know if it's called the Field Museum anymore in
Yeah,
Chicago.
it is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they've got some good stuff in Chicago. There's the Severance collection, which is in Cleveland, Ohio. Then there's the Keenbush collection of Otto von Keenbush, who collected a bunch of stuff and donated it to the Philadelphia Museum of Art. The Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York is huge, and a lot of pieces there. And then there's some in the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles, but most of them are in their archives. They're not on display. So the books that they say from the permanent exhibit from the from the 70s, publication date of permanent exhibit from the Natural History Museum, they're no longer on display. And there's a couple pieces of conquistador type armor at the Gene Autry Museum just down the street from me. And then I've done lecturing and demonstrating at the Getty Center in Brentwood, as well as the Getty Villa in Malibu, pertaining to historical medieval and Renaissance armors and the techniques and decorative processes used to make them. As well as at the Getty Villa, I talk more about the progression from Neolithic, from stone weapons to bronze to iron to progressing from the Greek and Roman weapons and so forth. But then in Europe, there's the Musée de l'Armée in Paris, the Kunsthistorischen Museum in Vienna, Bayernische National Museum in Munich, of course, the Tower of London in London, and the Royal Armories. Most of their armor moved from the small display at the White Tower at the Tower of London to a specific Royal Armories exhibit of the armor up in Leeds in northern England. And then the munitions, the weapons armor are down in Portsmouth, down in Fort Nelson. And then there's other collections like the Wallace collection in London, and the British Museum has some pieces, but more earlier Anglo-Saxon stuff, more like the Sutton Hoo swords and pattern welded pieces and so forth. When I called you a few months ago and I was going out to Ohio to do that demonstration, I was going to recreate basically a pattern welded sword similar to the Sutton Hoo sword that my now friend Scott Langton had created for the Wallace or for the British Museum. So when I first met Scott, I fanboyed over him big time. I couldn't even talk to him. I meet actors and I don't care. But I mean, God, I was just like goo over. So as I was doing my demonstration, I started making the sword and realized I didn't have enough time to really do it, and I was losing people's interest. So I made 6 daggers in that time period instead of making parts of one sword. That was a lot more intensive. But we started the process to show people to, get them involved. And I brought pieces that were similar to that they could handle, like Jon Snow's Longclaw sword. It's made out of 45 separate elements of steel that are forge welded together and forged to shape and ground and heat treated, and you can see the what do they call in Game of Thrones, what do they call it? They had a specific term for the pattern welding, but can't
remember.
Yeah,
the whole Damascus steel idea, I didn't when you were first talking to me about that, I didn't really understand what it was until I started watching Game of Thrones, and and now, I know I've seen it at your shop, but can you explain to people what that process is or how you make that very hardened steel?
Well, I belong to a group called ABANA, the Artist Blacksmith Association in North America, and they just did a write-up, a 3-page or 6-page write-up on some of my work. So ABANA's motto, it kind of pertains to, Damascus as well. And Damascus is a misnomer because Damascus is a city in Syria. And woot steel, crucible steel that the people were seeing in the Crusaders would see in Syria as they were, going on their holy crusades, surpassed the European-made steel. And so they marketed the Syrian, Damascus steel at the location they bought from Damascus. So, that was Wootz steel, which is a crucible steel, somewhat different. So the Vikings and Anglo-Saxons doing the Uthberg kind of stuff were forge welding dissimilar metals together, pattern welding it, and manipulating the pattern to have that shape that you would see in the Game of Thrones swords or some of the Viking pieces. And so you had like Indians making the Wootz steel, selling it through Damascus, Syria. Northern European, Scandinavians, and Germans making the pattern welded steel of their type with dissimilar stuff, and then the Japanese doing their own stuff with multiple folds of the steel and forge welding it together. And it was all very similar, it just to make something that worked well. So a homogeneous modern tool steel, for instance, like a leaf spring on a car, is mainly made out of 5160 steel. 51 prefix on it designates it's a medium carbon chromium bearing spring steel with 60. The final two numbers are how many hundredths of a percent of carbon are in it. So 5160 for leaf springs work well enough for a Mack truck, as well as edge retention and springiness make a great steel for swords. That's a good basic kind of thing. That would surpass most of the swords made by Japanese swords or Viking swords, or even more run-of-the-mill kind of pieces. But the masterpieces that were really kind of worked on would be better than that, just with differential hardening and stuff. So I mean, if you watch Forge and Fire, you'll get a lot of, pick up a lot of the terms and things on there, but it's basically trying to work with what you had to make the best use of the material. So you'd be using bog iron. Even back in Egyptian times, one of King Tut's daggers is made out of meteoritic iron, and that really doesn't, hold an edge that well, but it's better than bronze. And that was a Bronze era time period. There wasn't any naturally occurring iron anywhere for them to smelt out. They didn't have the temperatures or furnaces or anything to make it. So they took a piece of a star that fell to the ground, iron nickel, and shaped that up to be the knife blade, which made it more rare,
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's kind of neat, but it's just basically, I'm going to take, for long claw, I took 3 strips, 3 layers of 15 and 20 nickel bearing medium carbon steel, and laminated it with 1075 steel, which is 75 points of carbon. And I had 11 layers per billet or ingot that I'd forge weld together. So started off with 11 layers, heat and pressure, hit it hard, get it hot, hit it hard, the Abana thing, not necessarily hit it too hard, it'll separate, but get it to stick together under heat and pressure, and then draw it out, hammer it out into a long rod, twist it, and then do the same thing with 2 others, and then forge weld those 3 together. So I now have an inner core of 36 layers that are like a herringbone pattern. One twist going to the right, one twist going to the left, the other one going to the right. So it kind of gives it that, when I etch the metal, you can see what it's made out of. And then the cutting edge was made out of another 12 layers of high carbon steel laminated together, and then folded and then wrapped around the edge. So just to give similar to, what a migration period Viking sword would have been, But
do you do the Ohio event every year, or does it travel around the United States? I feel like you've been there before.
Yeah, the Ohio event is Southern Ohio Forge and Anvil, SOFA, and it's Quad State Blacksmith Gathering, and it happens every year at about September, late September. And I was supposed to demonstrate last year, but they canceled it, or not last year, because last year was 2 days ago, but the year before. in 2020, and it got canceled because of COVID. This year, I flew out there to demonstrate, and I was like, it was kind of odd because I got the brochure a few weeks before going out there and realized that with all the other people demonstrating, and there were another 8 to 10 people doing various forms of metalworking, I was the headliner. I was the main draw. So I had a little bit of an imposter syndrome on that, going, oh God, here's the guy like Scott Langton came down to be in my audience, and he's the guy who made the Sutton Hoo sword for the British Museum. So how can I be telling him how to do stuff? And but it worked out pretty well. And like I said, I think I made 3 or 4 pattern welded Damascus blades while they watched. I brought out a bunch of Hollywood props for people to check out, and then started forging the sword blades on Friday night for my demonstration. And I think it was, Friday. So Friday I had from after they had the opening. So from about 6 o'clock until 9 or 10 o'clock, I started, talking a little bit about what I was going to do and started prepping the piece. Saturday I had all day I could work on it, but I had to close up by 5 o'clock because they were going to host the auction and everything in the area I was working in. And then Sunday they told me I would have like a half day to work on it, and got in at 9, and they were already tearing down my work area. So I maybe got 12 to 15 hours of actual work time, where if I'd tried to make the whole sword, that would have been a 40-hour process. So I couldn't make it happen. Yeah. So I brought down a bunch of pre-heat treated hardened blades and showed different grinding techniques and polishing, finishing stuff. I do twist handle. So this is Keira Knightley's sword.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So this grip is made out of water buffalo horn. So
really,
this is black water buffalo horn that I sculpted up. And this one's a pretty interesting thing. Because you like stories about where things, origin stories and so forth. I made a sword for my son, Connor. And if you can see in this photograph, he's wearing it. You can't really see the sword, but he's wearing the baldric with the sword, the strap going around there. So at that point, he was probably about 5 or 6 years old. So I took the gold braid. Well, let's see, what did I start off with? So the blade was a leftover Civil War cutlass or saber from Tom Cruise from Last Samurai. The hilt was a piece that I had molded that had an imperfection in the mold from George Washington's sword that was used by the character Jacoby, the Mad Bomber, in the first Pirates of the Caribbean. So that this portion was from Jacoby. The pommel was Russell Crowe's dirk, or his little naval dagger from Master and Commander. So I had all these parts laying around, and we're going to a pirate convention or pirate fair. So I want to make something for my son to wear. So I took, Tom Cruise's blade. I took Russell Crowe's pommel. I took something from Pirates of the Caribbean, shortened it down so it's about like this long. And then the wire going in through here is not bright right now, but this is actually the gold braid that's inlaid into Norrington's sword from the first Pirates of the Caribbean when they talk about it. So I made the sword for him. We use it at the pirate thing, and then probably, I want to say 2006 or something, we're doing Pirates 2 and 3 happening together. And I send a bunch of samples out. I'd ordered some other samples that didn't get here in time from importers from India and China and whatever. And the stuff that I'd ordered got shipped to the wrong location. So there was at one point a few years ago, was a a mall store operated by a Pakistani importers called the Sword in the Stone. Now I'm the Sword and the Stone. So I placed the order. It went to the Sword in the Stone. They refused the shipment, and I didn't have the shipment to show for a show and tell. So I'm kind of scrambling. So I grabbed Connor's miniature sword made out of these cobbled together parts, sent it out there, and they selected the miniature sword from my son as Keira Knightley's sword for a battle on the beach with Will Turner, with Orlando Bloom, Keira Knightley as Elizabeth Swann, and Johnny Depp. Both of these swords, Jack Sparrow and Elizabeth Swann's swords, got damaged in that sword fight, and they needed to shoot some more the next day. So the prop master brought the swords in, and I was making copies for my showroom just as display models. And I said, I don't have time to fix what you brought in. If you can see here, the little dings on the edge.
Yep.
So that's from Johnny Depp using this sword. This has actual Johnny Depp's DNA on it, So they use that in Pirates too. And I got the swords to repair, and I said, I can't repair them in time, but I can give you these brand new ones you can take on set. So we exchanged them. So I have the screen used pieces, which was kind of cool.
That's very cool.
And I would show you the miniature sword, which is pretty hilarious because, where this piece is, I don't know, maybe 3 feet long. His comes to about here, just a little dagger kind of thing. So,
tell my favorite Connor story.
Oh, which one's that?
The Richard Tyler story.
Oh, okay. Connor
is Tony Swatton, just so you know.
Yeah. Now Connor's 21 and he's almost 6'5" now. He'll be coming out today to help me on some projects.
How tall are you, Tony? Because you're very tall.
I was like 6'2". When I moved my shop in 2016, I picked up a 350-pound anvil, which I'd moved hundreds of times before, but I was exhausted. And I rotated my torso and my right hip dislocated. My femur popped out of my pelvis. Which, obviously hurt. So I dropped the anvil, away from me. I didn't drop it on my feet or anything. And the hip popped back in, but it did some damage to the right hip. So between that point in early 2016, probably April of 2016 until early 2019, I was hobbling around and just crippled. And then I had a full hip replacement on my right hip. So I think I'm like 6'1.5" now, but I was like 6'2" at one point, So just between the injury and getting old.
Yeah, it happens to all of us.
Yeah,
I'm sure I'll be 5'5" any moment now.
Yeah. So so Connor was 7 years old. I had a tandem. I don't drive. I've never driven a car. I can operate pretty much any piece of equipment, welders.
I can fix that for you, Tony. Whenever you're ready, I will take you.
Well, I'm not really ready. I mean, I don't, I'm really uncomfortable in cars. So, so I had a tandem bicycle that I would get my kids to school or go on bike tours with them, bicycle 500 miles down the coast or something and go camping, which is my one of the rest and relaxation. So, we bicycled out to the Renaissance Fair out in like 20 some miles away. And we were wandering through fair, and Connor finds this tooled leather mask that a friend of mine, Mitchell, had made. And he goes, "Daddy, I want that mask." And I'm like, now Mitchell's asking $250, $300 for this beautiful tooled mask. And it's worth it, but he's 7 years old. He, it doesn't, I'm not going to do a frivolous purchase just because he says he wants it. So, this is early walking through the fair. The rest of the day, he's fixated on this mask. He's drawing in the sand and the dust, what he wants the rest of his dragon armor to look like. We buy fish and chips or something, and he's taking ketchup and drawing on the plate how the shoulders and the breastplate's going to work and everything. So I come back to Mitchell and I buy the mask from him. And, Connor's taken all these drawings, and then I take some of his drawings, and I'm sure I have them somewhere. I mean,
Now,
again,
how old is he at this point?
he was 7 years old.
7. Okay.
Yeah. So this is probably April of 2007. So he draws up this armor he wants. I sit down with him. This is a really cool bonding thing with my son to make things, and I elaborate on his drawings, and he's critiquing it. No, I don't want it to go that way.
Oh, I'm losing you.
No, you're back.
There you are. Now you're back.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, anyways, so I've only got 10% battery.
Okay.
So we make the armor. We get everything. I pattern out the armor. He traces out all the patterns on sheets of aluminum, and I make tooling for different machines where he can stamp it and shape it and whatever. And then we anodize it green. And so he puts all this stuff together. We work on it. He's like 7.5 years old. This is between May and June and July. And then on July 11th is his birthday. So he wears it to an event called the Labyrinth of Jareth, which is the biggest masquerade ball in North America. One of my friends, Fallon, Scarlet the Harlot, was wearing a Damascus armor, and I'd actually called a friend of mine I make jousting armor for, and borrowed his Clydesdale horse in full armor while she was dressed in armor to make our entrance into the event at the Music Box on Hollywood Boulevard. So she's riding a Clydesdale horse in full armor down the street. I'm dressed as God, I don't know what it was, some weird demon armor I made, and Connor's wearing his dragon armor, and we make our entrance into the event. And everyone knows me, and they know Connor has been making this armor, and it's physically his birthday. Now, he goes to bed at 8 o'clock. We get there at about 8:30. He's up until 11. Everyone's going, happy birthday and cool armor, and, pretty cool. A few weeks later, we go down to Comic-Con. So he's wearing that armor. He's walking around. It's made out of metal. He's clanking all over the place.
I saw him in
Yeah.
that armor at Comic-Con.
And, he's 8 years old. So he's, he's fading. So as he walks into, we're walking probably down where you and Dave are set up, but just further out towards the middle where all the toy salespeople and everything are. Maybe towards the Mattel booth or something.
Oh, yeah.
Someone's talking to me, but I can hear Connor and I can see him. And so this person walks up to Connor, and it's Richard Taylor from Weta Workshops, who'd done Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and, a bunch of other things. And he's talking to Connor, and he's going, where'd you get the armor? That's really cool. He goes, oh, I made it. What do you mean you made it? Oh, I used a Polmax and a Beverly shear and kick presses, and then we anodized it, and I patterned it out here. My daddy bought the mask, and he's like, who's your daddy? And he's like, Tony Swatton, the Sword in the Stone. He's of course, But I was just talking to Connor about this a couple weeks ago. Richard had given him his full context thing. He's 8 years old at this point, saying, well, in 10 years, if you want to come to New Zealand, work for me, let me know. Here's my numbers. So
yeah.
We'll see if he's seriously interested in that. I mean,
that would be very cool.
I've got a bunch of friends in Weta that New Zealand's currently on lockdown because of COVID, so I don't think it would happen for a few years. But
probably, yeah. But by then, Connor's going to be even better at what he does.
Yeah, if he continues with it. So I mean, I had him in the other day. He was gold plating the sword hilts for the stuff that we're doing for this video game to be disclosed when it gets released next year.
Yeah,
it so sucks. Everything I work on, I can't talk.
I know
about.
You can't. I know.
Yeah.
What can we look forward to in the future? What will you be on? Any shows or any?
Well, the sword I'm making for the video game thing will be released, so that'll be on a show.
But will you be featured on anything like a documentary or?
Well, I'll be featured on this show making the sword. So
okay.
Yeah, it's going to be like Azeroth Armory or Man at Arms. I'm trying to think of what other interviews. I've got this really high-profile interview happening currently with this podcast with Denise Dorman.
Yes, I know the most important one of all. Yes.
I I don't know. I mean, there are a couple projects on the 300 plus movies I've worked on. I've only been credited on Don Juan DeMarco, which is with Johnny Depp and Marlon Brando and Faye Dunaway back in 1993. I'm not a union shop, so you know, a lot of the stuff I do, the union prop makers or costume designers and stuff, you know, are not obligated or even allowed to mention where they got the stuff from unless I'm a union affiliate. So I'm working on that. So I get about 7%. So we're
All
probably
right, kiddo.
Yeah. Well, pleasure talking to you. I got to get back to work and
Same here.
yeah. So when you guys
Thank you,
come
Tony.
back, yeah, thank you. And you know, hopefully that was informative. You know, I mean, I wish
Very.
more stuff, but you know, there's enough stuff just around me right here. So you know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this is a great show and tell.
Yeah, cool.
Excellent. All right,
Well,
Tony. Have the best day ever.
Thank you. All right.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.